Become a member on Patreon to watch the ad-free video version of this interview. The link is in the description.
Beyond the Forbidden.
Welcome to Beyond the Forbidden. Today on the show, I got my brother from another mother, Beyond the Forbidden's favorite demonologist, Nathaniel, my man, Gillis. How you been, man?
What's going on, brother? It's always great to be on with you. Love you as a brother and respect you. And I love being on your show, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
It's been a few months. So what you been up to?
Yeah. You know, I'm back at it. I took most of June off, or most of May off.
Yeah, but, I did too. I had to take a small little break.
You got to, man. You got to recharge. And you know, I don't know. I've gotten to a certain level with my research where I'm kind of, not only am I questioning what these beings are, but the overall power they have in our reality makes me wonder how much of this is real. I mean, you know, if we're talking about entities that can walk through a wall and place an entire family into suspended animation, where they're just literally just zombies, then they have a significant amount of access over our species. And then I'm thinking, well, who could have that access? What kind of species would have that kind of key to our existence? Just open the door and anything and everything they want, they get. And so that's really what I've been questioning as of late. I have a series of shows. I'm going to be on Rex Bear's Leap Project Fest, which I'm going to be giving a presentation, be recording that later this month. But it's an interesting time, my friend.
So you know that that guy from Las Vegas, or that I guess he's a teenager. You remember the Las Vegas encounter, last year?
Yes.
So he recently came forward, right? Recently came forward, and I'm trying to find my notes, but I don't see them. I must have left it in my other computer laptop in yonder. But so he came forward and said he's kind of have a mixed feelings, or he's kind of changed his perspective of what he encountered last year. So last year, that they saw like this 8, 9, 10-foot creature or being or entity, whatever it is, and now they're having, since then, they've been having like these poltergeist type things in their house, where he just came forward. I think this is like the first time he's come forward since last year. And it was the news were there talking to him, whatever, and saying that there was a Bible levitating. I think it was a Bible levitating in the house. And they have these poltergeist type activities in the house. And then I think the reporter said something like, do you think there's a correlation between what's going on, this poltergeist type activity, this ghost or whatever, supernatural type activity in the house? Is there a correlation connection with what happened last year? And he says, yes, he believes there is. Boom, bingo, ding, 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 ding. You know what I was thinking of?
What?
They're masquerading. It's a different mask. It's the same
Absolutely.
thing. It could be the same entity. It may be shape shifted into what that was last year. This or whatever it was. It could have been a big, tall, huge shadow entity, whatever. But it's playing. It's like a trickster type element that Dr. Carla Turner, they're showing different masks. Ray Fitzgerald, you all talk about it, and Dr. Carla Turner, especially back in the 90s, that it's the same phenomena, just with a different mask. So I just thought when he said that, it's like, boom, there it is, there.
That should not be taking place if these are in fact different phenomena, different sources of energy, but they are, and we've seen that over and over and over again. The case studies are replete with that. And I think that more than anything else, we have to collapse these older models. They're antiquated. They no longer fit the bill. Something is manifesting in ways that we as a species are evolving enough to notice. And that may turn out to be a problem. You mentioned Dr. Turner. She hypothesized at one point that it may be that our species, that we're waking up to this, that we weren't even meant to witness this phenomenon. We were just going to go, our daily routine. We're going to mate, we're going to eat, we're going to defecate, we're going to die, and then the phenomenon would exist next to us without us even knowing it. And so it's possible that we as a species are evolving to a point where, yes, we're making eye contact with it. And that may prove to be a problem. But more to your point, yes, the evidence is pointing us to the fact that this is a single source, that whatever we're dealing with, it almost uses each and every paranormal field as a mask, as an archetype in which it leans into and sometimes leans out of. This is something that I mentioned the other day on Paul Sinclair's Truth Proof channel on YouTube, wherein people will suggest that the demonic hypothesis that's just a social construct. And I point out that it may have been a social construct, but that the phenomenon was creating physiological constructs of demonic entities, horns and hooves, to where our ancestors would have pointed to that and said, okay, those are demons. And so essentially what I'm saying here, my friend, is that yes, this intelligence has the ability to create entire images and then lead us down that gloomy labyrinth of deception to where, okay, it's literally authoring its own mythology. And at the end of the day, we're wondering, is that even real? Is that the real manifestation? Is that the truest essence of the source? And so what I try to do is really hit that point home. Yes, it was a social construct, but it was a social construct authored by the phenomenon. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. And so there could be also a correlation between what I think what's going on, and we're about to get in whatever you want to talk about too. It all relates. But so with the observer effect, like you and I could be walking down the street and I could see a craft or I could see an entity or whatever, and you wouldn't see it. Or you could see it, but you see something different. So
Correct.
could that be a correlation with that? These things utilize us somehow, tap into whatever, I don't know, and tap into where something like the observer effect connects with like where we create our own reality. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yes.
whatever, like that guy in Las Vegas. So last year he saw that, whatever that entity, 9 foot, whatever tall entity was in the backyard through the fence, and now because they are very religious. So whatever that entity is using altars and things like that in the house because they know that they are religious. They're using Bibles, sigils, and all these things, these crosses, in the house. That's how it's showing itself. It's masquerading
Right.
behind that face.
Absolutely. Yes. So that there were two theories that a lot of people were, well, they were very interested in it because, you had one side of the field that was saying, okay, everything is consciousness. We're actually manifesting this phenomenon. And the other side was like, no, these are exterior entities, right? That are invasive, parasitic, and they're leaning into these archetypes. And I'm in the middle to where I think it's a little bit of both because my own experience with the succubus, where I went into a nightmare and it was present in my nightmare. And then when I woke up, it was also on top of me in reality. And so my position is in the middle in the sense that the phenomenon will often manifest to us and then manipulate our emotions to agree with the image we're witnessing.
It's kind of like the story I told you last year with
Mhm.
I don't know, about 15, 16 years ago, whenever it was, with my ex-girlfriend.
Mhm. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely.
Is that succubus or incubi?
That would be a succubus.
Succubus.
Absolutely.
And we know where she came to she cheated on me, broke
Right.
up, and all that stuff, and
And it wasn't her.
I'm young and dumb, and she could be playing tricks on my mind. Could
Right.
possible, and she said that we came in, we did the thing, and I let her, because she was crying, all that stuff. And anyways, I never heard from her again after that. She left my apartment, and I saw her later. I don't know, whenever it was, couple weeks, month later, whenever. And so where you been? She's like, huh? Like she acted like she
Yeah.
didn't even
Like it
know
never
that
happened.
she like,
Right.
or could have been her, but something was using her,
Right.
like she blanked out, or
Right.
it could have just, well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, there have been cases in the Men in Black lore where these, for lack of a better term, beings knock on the door of a witness. The witness comes out, what can I do for you? Well, have you been having nightmares lately? And this gets back into Nick Redfern's research, where like in World War I, World War II, where they wanted to check the meter, right? Okay, the meter's downstairs. Okay, we'll be downstairs. We'll be up in a second. So they're downstairs for 2 hours, and they never come back up. Gone. And so this is why this is what led some researchers to believe that a lot of these men in black were, again, physiological constructs. They were incarnations of this phenomenon. And they didn't know it. They're interacting. Oh, I'm interacting with a person and a species. No, you're interacting with the intelligence. It's dawned an avatar, and that's what we're conversing with. But I mean, even in witch air literature, we've had cases. There was one specific case that I had. It's incredible, where the husband goes to bed at night, and these what were called demons. Then they abducted the wife, and so the husband gets up to use the restroom. He looks over. There's his wife laying in bed, but it wasn't his wife. And so in their vernacular in that time in history, they called that image a familiar spirit. It's something that appeared as much as of the wife as possible, but at the end of the night, it was not her at all. And so there's this kind of, it's a very weird phenomenon, but this gets back to the Vatican and their modification of their apparitions, in terms of how do you determine if this apparition is sent from God, and if it in fact aligns with the tradition of the church. And just the fact that they have to come forward and say, hey, listen, let's kind of modify these rules. Let's refresh some of our teachings here. That it's alarming to me, because what that implies is that, and we know this, but let's make it clearer, that what that implies is that not everything that appears angelic is angelic. And it puts us as a species in this problem wherein you and I could be talking. I said this on another show the other day. You and I could be talking, bro, and we go through that throughout the show. We have good conversation. We dap it up if we could cyberly at the end. See ya. And then tomorrow you go to work or you go to the gas station and you bump in on Nathaniel Gillis. And Nathaniel Gillis, or that Nathaniel Gillis, begins to just deconstruct our entire conversation the night before. And you go home thinking, okay, I'm glad he clarified that, not realizing that that was not really me. That was a physiological construct of the phenomenon. And so then you have dueling apparitions. What does one say versus what the other one says? And so the Vatican comes forward, and in my opinion, in a form of disclosure, if in fact you do witness something that says it's from the church, this is how you test that spirit. Which is, it's profound to me, especially with somebody who's had his finger on the pulse, as I have. It's alarming, because then it opens up the big can of worms. Okay, what do we do with these apparitions within ufology? What is the official stance of the church regarding these manifestations? Because a lot of these beings will manifest as Jesus. But to me, and I'll stop rambling, but to me, it's painting a picture that
Fatima, yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody asked me that question the other day, where the photographic evidence did not align with what the witnesses said they saw. Completely different. It's weird. But what this points to, at least from my perspective, is that we're not dealing with extraterrestrials. We're dealing with something that is meddling in mythology. And like I said before, using the pin of physiological constructs to author its own mythology. To where you and I, like I said before, our ancestors believe they were demonic. Why? Because they manifested as demonic. This is no different than when Ed Warren was on a case and he said that he witnessed a real demon. And somebody said, well, what did it look like? He said, well, it had horns. Okay, let's test that. Let's go back into antiquity. When did the horned demon originate? Okay, it wasn't there. That was literally it was a belief system that our ancestors just put on and kind of projected upon the phenomenon. But what that is, though, my friend, is we caught the phenomenon in real time as it leans into an archetype that has no real historical record.
What if it's not? So our ancestors, ancient ancestors, or not even ancient, our ancestors, it manifested to them as somewhat demonic,
That's what I'm saying.
and
Yeah,
it still kind of
absolutely.
does now. But now I would say majority is it's kind of a mix, or maybe a little bit more of manifesting into our loving space brothers.
Right, right. Yeah, it's almost like it's not just authoring its own mythology, but it's using an avatar that we cannot really vet. I mean, the two portions of our existence we are the most ignorant of. I say death and the outer space. I mean, the third one would be, at the bottom of the oceans, of our oceans. But what it comes down to is we cannot vet this. And the reason our ancestors believed in these archetypes, it's not because they just woke up one day. No, it's because that was what the phenomenon gave them to believe in. Right. And then so now as it evolves according to our awareness of it, it's changing its archetypes. And now what we have is exactly the point you just made, the alien, the extraterrestrial, which now it's pushed us in a corner to where we cannot verify the nature of the message. Is it beneficial, or is it a Trojan horse? More than that, is what they're telling me, is that actually true? Can I actually believe in their message? And so where we're at right now in all of this, it's sad, but it's true. Now it's like, okay, how do I verify the truthfulness of your message to humanity? Oh, that's right. Phenomenon, manifestation, something that would impress anybody. And so it's almost like we're groping in the darkness, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. They do not want us to verify and validate them. That's in my perception. From my perception, I think that's why they authored the avatar of the alien.
They want to keep it compartmentalized with
Yeah.
with each individual experiencer,
Yes.
to where maybe they may want to show particular experiencer particular face, whatever,
Right.
you know.
Mhm.
But might have to ring the doorbell,
It's all good.
but but yeah, so but also I think what happened is before, I know I love, these conversations, man, because we
Mhm.
totally, this just went out left field, because I know you had your whatever you want to talk about. But one last thing. So I'm starting to lean more towards that they are maybe, I don't know, you call them priests, you could call them ancient occultists or whatever. Or
Mhm.
back in the day, somehow I think what happened is they closed the door, maybe after the dark ages, I don't know, but you would have at least slip throughs and things would happen every now and then. But I think
Mhm.
the door for majority of the time was probably locked
Mhm.
somehow, I don't know, the gateway, whatever, to this other side, this other realm. And then maybe more modern day, it just exploded because you had these occultists like Aleister Crowley and others, or Jack Parsons, and that they reopened the door, and we're
Mhm.
seeing a different phenomena. And that's why we had
Yes.
this explosion, within the last, I would say, 80 to 100 years or so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you kind of retrace these footsteps back into antiquity, when this intelligence began grooming the human condition, it would often it would often appear as a deceased ancestor. And then later on, oh my God, I'm deity, or I'm a demigod. And yet, when you look at the funerary rites, specifically within Levant, Mesopotamia, you see that they evolved. And so one man's deceased ancestor, became another man's demon, and then that became another man's god. And yet, when you look at the root system, the foundation of it all, it didn't really matter what these beings called themselves. They still demanded the same sacrifices, the same altars.
Mhm.
And what bugs me the most about all of this is we are not us, but the field is so quick to latch on to one mask, and then let that mask define all of the research they've done to that point. And it's like, okay, but if they were once ancestors, and then okay, we're not that anymore. Now we're demigods, and then no, we're not demigods anymore. Now we're demons. They're the ones that have been authoring many of these evolutions and adaptations within our species, constantly leading us by the hand into different incarnations, different emanations. But at the end of the day, we don't really know what they are. We can't pinpoint them. And I know I could just speak for myself. I struggle with the vocabulary that that can articulate this intelligence, because the idea that it's coming to us I can deal with, but there is also a measure of them coming through us. And so I'm landing somewhere in the middle, because poring over copious amounts of case studies, like with incubus and succubus, succubi, there was this cognitive interface, the phenomenon employs. It was almost like testing, and I've mentioned this in other shows, testing the belief of the experiencer. Do you believe I am the deceased ancestor? Right? Here's the mask. Do you believe I am the demon?
It needs you to believe. So that's like putting the key in the door.
Absolutely, my friend. Yes. And it took me a while to get to that point where I was like, all right, I'll even entertain that. But that's what the evidence is pointing to, my friend. It's there. And so there's a difference in staging where the phenomenon manifests. Do you believe I am who I appear to be? And then during that portion of the experience, it's testing. And then what's so fascinating about this, I have collected evidence where the experiencers are being shown this image, and then suddenly there are emotions that push them into believing in the image, to where it's just fascinating. But okay, yeah, I believe, or I'm still questioning. And all of a sudden they start feeling emotions. Oh yeah, I believe you are who you appear to be. Of course you're who you're saying you are. And so there is this assistance in belief that the phenomenon induces within the experiencer. So in a way, it's not just coming to the experiencer with the cognitive interface, it's coming through them. And through perception management, it creates this symbiotic relationship. That's powerful. Where the
Yes, it is.
phenomenon is an image, and then the experiencer is believing in the image, and that creates a covenant of consent. Now that intelligence has the authority, forget the name, forget the image. It's all about what they do. Now it has the authority to step into that role. And I believe 100% this is why the masks all change, but it's what they're doing that matters. If you believe in the mask, it'll step into that role. And the role is not just what you see, the role is what it does. Now it has access. So this is why the Collins elite back in the 50s, between the 50s and the 80s, actually, they came to the conclusion, number one, that don't believe in them. That was their advice to people. Think about that. You're a physicist from the Department of Defense, and your only advice to people who are suffering from some of the most traumatic experiences known to man, don't believe in them. And it made no sense at first blush until you start to get into some of these case studies and realize that many times it was disbelieving in them. I don't believe you are at all what you appear as. That's when we put this phenomenon in the position of having to improvise.
Awesome, man. Well said. So
That's deep
yes, it
stuff.
is. I can keep on going with that, but where did you want to segue into? I know it all correlates,
Yeah, well, it all correlates. It really wouldn't matter what I was going to talk about, because that somehow we would have stumbled on a subject like this. But this believing aspect of the phenomenon is something that cannot be overstated, because again, belief has the ability to create. And I think that whatever this intelligence is, it needs our involvement in order to become incarnate. It goes all the way back to antiquity. Build me an altar. Why? If you were self-sufficient, self-sustaining, you would not need anything from me. Matter of fact, you wouldn't even want anything from our species. But that's never been the case. Over and over and over again, and it's interreligious, cross-cultural. Whatever these beings are, they need something from us.
And sometimes it could be sacrifice, because
Absolutely.
sometimes that altar, man, especially the past 100 years, a little
Oh
over
yeah.
since World War I, the battlefields. And what
Oh
is
yeah.
it? What is it about the blood? What is it? Is it just a metaphor that they use, or shedding the blood onto the altar that they are creating within this battle? Like, and maybe they're working alongside, or some of these elites, oligarchs in the world, the
Mhm.
ones that, and that are pretty much running the show,
Yes.
are they in communication, or are they possessed, or whatever, to where they
This.
they, they want us to go to war and shed blood?
Mhm.
There's something else. Is what is it with the blood? Because if you go, like you say, in antiquity, the blood, talking about the blood, and
Oh my
and
God, yeah.
and,
And
and
what were called
sacrifices everywhere.
Molech, which was infant sacrifice. It was known as Molech, which was the god of child sacrifice, but it was actually a reference to infantilism, which is a demon where they would actually go worship this deity. And in order to do that, they would kill their own babies, which you can edit that out. But my point is this though, that regardless of what we're dealing with, we have to collapse all models. We have to start looking at, okay, what do they want from us and why, which is exactly what we're doing. But more importantly, it's almost like we're being groomed by overlords who will tell us what to do and then give us the wrong reasons or a lie as to why we're doing it. Because constantly, it's crazy, but yeah, it wasn't just one sacrifice. No, you got to have another one. And I'll tell you what's interesting enough. In my research, I found some of these manuscripts written about the Rephaim in Syria. And our ancestors did not separate hauntology from ufology, or hauntology from anything else. It wasn't this that. No, there was no paracons or no conflict. No, matter of fact, in their worldview, the phenomenon had conditioned them to believe that if they did not provide sacrifices, they would be haunted by demons. Where they're not separate entities to these people, right? What they realized was no, that okay, yeah, you're haunted. Okay, yeah, that's a weapon designed by the phenomenon. It's not a completely separate intelligence. The phenomenon has weaponed your worst fears, weaponized. Sorry, gotta edit that. They believe that hauntology in itself was weaponized by the phenomenon. There we go. In that these weren't separate fields of research or separate manifestations of different beings. No, it was something that the phenomenon punished them with. Oh,
Mm.
I thought that was just alien. No, 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 no. And what we're witnessing now, even in the case study you mentioned earlier in Las Vegas, I believe, where it's starting to get more legitimate,
Hmm.
right? It's a lot more validated than it was prior. But I mean, what we're looking at now is the same thing our ancestors realized was that, yeah, sure, ufology can be placed in one corner and hauntology in another. But what about the case studies where both phenomena are present with each other in the same house? They knew that because they recorded it. And the phenomenon led them to believe that, hey, listen, yeah, if you don't obey us, we will use our abilities to haunt you. We've also seen that, mind you, within the Skinwalker Ranch phenomenon. When I know his real name, but when Axelrod was there studying and documenting manifestations on the property, his family gives him a call. His wife gives him a call. Hey, listen, what? We're being haunted. Haunted by what? A cryptid staring in the windows at us. So already right there, we see, okay, well, I thought cryptozoology was something completely different. It's not. That is a phenomenon that can be weaponized, but whatever this intelligence is, which would, it's at least in my ADHD mind, would place us into a unique context where it's all centered. It's one source. And at times throughout history and even now modernity, it can diversify its identity And then in doing so, people will say, oh my God, yeah, that's a cryptid. That's the source. And what it's doing the same thing it's done throughout history. Okay, you're getting too close to me. You better get back. Right? Or don't go over there. Come over here. And in order to do so, it weaponizes certain manifestations. Our ancestors knew that.
The other day when we was talking on the phone, I mentioned, and some people may not like what I'm going to say, but me and you and I was raised Pentecostal, a lot of tongue speaking, speaking in tongues.
Correct. Yeah.
So when I got off the phone when we was talking, I started thinking maybe later that day or whatever, what if it's more of a casting a spell to act as a doorway
Mhm.
for things to escape from the other side? And some things that are already here, they escape from the other side that's been here for however long or whenever. They escapes through other means, maybe through people like Aleister Crowley, other occultists, whatever it is. The but what do you think of speaking in tongues with like maybe casting spells or just using, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, yes. I mean, we're
what's your
getting
thoughts on
into.
that?
I think. I mean, I've witnessed it in real time, as you have too. It's when you've seen the real thing, it's the real thing.
I just don't
And
understand. I said it the other day when some of them could be good experiences,
Mhm.
you know, but man, after after a revival, everybody's drained. Most people are
Right.
drained. Why? What's
Mhm.
being drained from you? Your essence, your energy. We know that the dark side likes using your energy and
Mhm.
this phenomena. And then, I've seen 300-pound men just do a front flip over a pew. I've seen 60, 70-year-old women run with their eyes shut,
Mhm.
not hitting anything with their eye. And I've seen
Oh
some
yeah.
with their eyes rolled back, you
Oh
know?
yeah. It's a very strange phenomenon. But what I can tell you is this: there was a guy named Jonathan Suber, like 20 years ago, at least. He was in the UPCI and he was raised in Africa. He was a white missionary's kid in Africa, but he was trained in spiritual warfare by the Africans. And so they told him, like if you're in there up there preaching and you feel something choking you, there's a witch in the midst. You need to stop what you're doing, address it, and then all that. So he was very, very, very powerful. He was telling a story to us one time though. He was like, he goes, it may have been at the actual church I was attending at the time. Anyways, he said he was at the altar call. He's walking the altar, praying for people, and he said this young woman, uh, when he walked by her, it activated a spirit in her, and it spoke fluent French. And he said the sentence, I can't say it obviously, but in fluent French, Jonathan,
Mm,
do you remember me? He's a bad dude.
mm,
He caught it, and he spoke back in French. Yes, I do. I cast you out of an old man in Ghana at a crusade 4 years ago. So he's conversing with it in French. Now, to anybody else, when that little Caucasian girl begins to speak fluent French, and people who know her know she's never been to France. She doesn't. She's not French. She's from Kentucky, or she's anywhere that. Yeah, that to us that would be speaking in tongues.
what if it's two different entities, whether good or bad,
Right.
conversing with each other? Like one possessed
Mhm.
is
Oh yeah,
it's
and that's
speaking one is speaking through that child to
Mhm.
another because it's using that child as an altar or as a device to
Right.
physically speak.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the Pentecostal tradition, which is the Holy Ghost, right, and envelops you and lives inside of you, and then so that would be his gift, conversing with that entity. But then again, you would have these two entities, the two spirits, wearing these people as avatars, right? One in the demoniac and the other in the preacher. It's fascinating stuff. But yeah, we would see that obviously looking from the outside in, we would think, that person is speaking another language because she's possessed. And so this gets back into some of the weird phenomena I've seen, and we both seen in Pentecostalism, where I remember hearing a story where this Greek Orthodox priest went to one of their services. I want to know about this speaking in tongues. And they had this big time preacher up there. He's laying hands on people. He just preached an hour-long message about God. And then when he starts speaking in tongues, the spirit inside of him spoke in Greek. And it said, there is no God. God does not exist. And so it's a paradox because this message, yeah, it didn't even agree with the unction within him. And so that caused that Greek Orthodox priest to just, he walked out, never went back to a service ever again. So there is this, you're right, it's very strange stuff.
Maybe there
But
is, like I said, maybe there is like good with it, but
right,
if your soul, your spirit, whatever your essence, your everything about you, if you're not living that pure life and you try to somehow speak in tongues or whatever, you get in that state of mind and you're not pure enough, like,
right,
and maybe that allows something else to come through. It could be some ancient language, some ancient
absolutely.
force, some ancient entity, and then here you are possessed because you was trying to you was in search of the Holy Spirit, the divine.
Yeah, yeah. It's like story that Paulino told, which God rest his soul, is a great guy. Paulino. He recently passed about maybe 2 months ago. But a great researcher, and he tells a story about how when he was in seminary, he was called upon to join an exorcism. So he's there with a couple of his mentors, professor, and the priest. And in the middle of this exorcism, in his mind, Paul thought, this is baloney. And somehow that entity heard it or picked it up. I don't want to say heard it because, it didn't have ears, but anyways, snapped to attention, looked right at Paul and spoke in a language that had been dead for like hundreds of years. In fact, it was only after Paul graduated from seminary that his professor set him down and said, okay, now that you're through all of that, we want to ask you about this certain exorcism that you went to. Oh yeah, like a couple years ago. Yeah. Do you remember much about that night? He goes through, yeah, this is what I remember. He goes, okay, well, let's draw your attention to the moment when that entity spoke perfect Malay to you. He goes, so you actually determined what language it was? Yeah, it was Malay. Well, what'd he say? And they said, that's why we wanted to wait to tell you. The entity told you in perfect Malay that he was there when your father killed himself, and he was the one that made him pull the trigger. Which absolutely devastated him. I mean, I remember him telling that story at the Exeter conference. But yet, so it goes to show you, you know what I mean? Like, some of these beings are outright evil. Like, there's no way in heck you would tell that to an 18, 19-year-old kid unless you're absolutely trying to hurt him.
And I asked my wife, since we was on this topic, I asked her
Mhm.
probably I think that night after I got the phone with you, because she was raised Baptist,
Mhm.
and she said, I said, did your church ever speak in tongues? She said, no, never. A lot of
Yeah,
other Orthodoxes, they kind of frown upon it. Makes you want to
right.
vomit, you know.
I get it. I get it. And
But
so if you get the pure thing, I mean, I've seen it in real life. And I mean, some of the guys that they would bring through the church were, I mean, they would make Crowley run for the hills. I mean, in a good way. Like, they were so powerful, powerful. Like my dad's old pastor Hashir, there were like 2 or 3 times a year he would fast for 40 days.
damn,
And then he would wean himself down, and then he would take the next 2 or 3 months to build his body back up. He was to the point where, like, there was one lady who was like, I don't believe in God, and her husband was going to church. He's like, okay, I'm going to send an angel to you. Just don't be scared. He'll be in your house tonight. Love you, sister. God bless. Gets in his Cadillac, drives off. Well, guess what? She gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and there is an angel, an entity. I shouldn't say it wasn't like wings and a sword. There was a being standing at the end of her bed, staring at her. Yeah, he was a bad dude. He had there was a young man was going to the church. You can edit this out if you want, but he overdosed on heroin, I think. And they asked him what he remembered. This is nuts. So what happened was the night this young man overdosed, Hashir gets up. His wife was already up at night doing something. And she said, Hus, what are you doing? He said, the Lord just told me to pray for so-and-so. So at that same time Hashir was praying, that young man was in the back of an ambulance. I'm telling you, this is going to blow your mind. And he said, the only thing he remembered, he said he was going down, 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 down. He said, I kept feeling hands hit me. And these things were saying, we've got him, we've got him, we've got him. He said, then I heard the voice of Hashir say, in the name of Jesus, I said to let him go.
Whoa.
Then he gets out, he gets back into his body, looking around in the ambulance. He was a bad dude. Bad dude.
Damn.
I got chills, man.
It kind of reminds me of I think, and we're about to end it here in just a minute, but
Yeah.
kind of reminds me, I think I told you, and I've mentioned a few other times on the show, but growing up, even living out, since I left my parents' home,
Mhm.
once in a blue moon, it still happens, but not quite as much. I'll be laid in bed, almost asleep, almost there, just still conscious, but barely, It's almost like my mother speaking my name, yelling my name right there by my ear. Michael.
Right.
I'm like, what? I'm talking about that used to happen a lot.
Mhm.
Now, is that just me like daydreaming, like literally because I'm not really asleep? Or is
Mhm.
it something trying to call and lure me into something, into some kind of trap? You know,
Who knows, man?
have you
That's
heard
a
of
tough
things like
one.
that? Like, have you ever experienced something
Yeah.
like that where you're not asleep yet? You're close, but you're not asleep yet, and you hear
Yeah.
somebody, your a parent or whoever, yell your name.
My grandma came to me. It was in a dream, but it was real as real could be. And it was strange. It was about, which you can edit this out, by the way, but it was about me getting back at church. Very strange. I mean, it freaked me out because I that's what it was. I was in a church and there's this, I'm in like in the pews, and there's this Bible next to me, and this little boy walks over and he hands me this bookmark, puts it right in the Bible, closes it. And I'm like, what in the world's going on? So then it goes, the scene changes to where I'm in my a house that I have, and I have a wife and a daughter. Weird. And I have these three vials, which growing up at church is anointing, unction, and all that. And
Mm.
they got boogered, not boogered, but just dust all over them and stuff, cobwebs. And I opened them up, and I said, "Where are these? Where did these come from?" And I turn around, and my grandma's on the couch, and she has the Bible with that bookmark in it.
Mm.
And she says, "Well, that's for you." And I said, "Wait a minute." In the dream, I said, "How am I talking to you right now?" I said, we're not supposed to be talking." She goes, "Well," she goes, "sometimes God allows us to push the ends of our fences together to where we can communicate." And
Mm.
that's what this is. And crazy. But I'm gonna try
Wow.
to get out of here. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
man.
blew my mind. But I'm gonna go watch. I'm trying to get my dad to go with me to B-Dubs, Buffalo Wild Wings, and watch the game tonight. But
Oh
no,
yeah.
man, we'll
Well,
see.
anyways, but man, Nathaniel Gillis, my brother from another mother, the demonologist, Beyond the Forbidden's favorite
So
demonologist. Thank
thank
you
you,
for coming
brother.
back on, man.
Not a problem, man. Always a pleasure, buddy.